Welcome to the Inverted Upside Down. You're listening to Paranormal Now with Alan B. Smith, rebroadcast on the UNX Network, Thursdays at 11 p.m. Pacific, Fridays at 2 a.m. Eastern.
However you are and whenever you are, welcome, good souls, to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the paranormal highway, the cosmic, tantalizing turnoffs of high strangeness every week. Thank you so much for joining. We have a really awesome guest tonight. He has been on here before. His name is Reinerio Hernandez, and he is the author of a new book, The Mind of God, a Spiritual Virtual Reality Mode of Consciousness and Contact Modalities. Now, you've heard from Ray before. This is a new branching off of his original work with Free. So we'll talk about that and the many other books to follow. It's really exciting, and I really appreciate the work Ray is doing and his enthusiasm. So you'll see that in just a moment. And if, like me, for your adventures, you always take a brew, a cup of coffee, whether it's in a car, spaceship, or on a podcast, I am drinking tonight the one and only Alien Coffee Bean Coffee. So if you would like to get Alien Coffee Bean Coffee Roasts, then go to aliencoffeebean.com and enter in the Paranormal Now discount code for 20% off, which is Mystery20, Mystery20, all caps. And that's shipping in the US only, by the way. All right. And, I wanted to actually share something with you because, on the show, we talk about gratitude with a lot of the guests. And, I am extraordinarily grateful. My wife and I, we moved out of the city about a year ago. We've gone through, some adjustment and changes. And, we're coming out of the summer season into now we're in fall and leaning towards winter. And we still have these amazingly beautiful flowers. I just want to put some of these on screen for you. So my wife Omi, she curated these flowers from seed to plant, and we always talk about celebrating life here, and I just wanted to share with you the love of my life, the beauty and the joy that she brings into our home. And these are just awesome, and these are actually cosmos flowers that you're looking at. And no pun intended, but they're just really beautiful, and I just wanted to share that with everybody. If you can see that on screen. Yeah, that's it. I mean, we're out in the wide open now, and back in the day, instead of this view, it would be the building across the street in Queens. So we are utterly grateful, and I just want to share that with everybody tonight. All right, and speaking of gratitude, we have a great guest on tonight. Ray, welcome back to Paranormal Now. How are you?
Thank you for the invitation, Alan.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm excited. I always love having you on. One, yes, because of your enthusiasm, but two, because of the work that you actually do. It's astounding. So tell us a little bit about your transition from Free into your work with this series of books, starting with The Mind of God.
Okay. First of all, the organization, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, and let me talk a little bit about that. That was an organization that was started by Dr. Edgar Mitchell, myself, Dr. Rudy Shields, and Mary Rodwell, to study not UFOs. We were never a ufology organization. We were studying the relationship between what is consciousness, what is the nature of our reality, and individuals that were having UFO-related contact experiences. And we brought in a very large team of approximately 8 retired Ph.D. academics with individuals that had researched the UFO contact phenomenon for many, many years. People like, for example, Kathleen Martin. I'm assuming you've had her on your show before.
Absolutely.
People like Dr. Leo Sprinkle, the late Dr. Leo Sprinkle. He started researching UFO contactees in the 1960s. People like Barbara Lamb, And those are just, and Mary Rodwell, these are just four examples. We had about five other individuals. One was Brent Raines, who worked very closely with J. Allen Hynek, and also later on with John Keel, a very important ufologist that viewed the UFO lens from a paranormal perspective.
Sure, yeah.
We had Rosemary Allen Guiley at that time. I think she had published, she's also deceased, approximately 65 books on all aspects of the paranormal.
And what about yourself? What about your own study and what you're bringing to the table?
Well, just wanted to lay out that these were all the people involved in that research study, and we wound up publishing this book titled Beyond UFOs. And whoops, it doesn't show on the screen very well.
I think that's good symbolism for tonight's topic, right?
Yes, well, that's exactly what the UFO contact phenomenon is. These are holographic projections. So this book basically was the world's first comprehensive, worldwide, multi-language, academic, statistical research study of more than 4,300 individuals from more than 125 countries that had UFO contact experiences. We developed 3 huge surveys. It took us 5 years to implement the study. And we published all the data in this book, Beyond UFOs, and we also published 2 peer-reviewed publications. And what we found out in that research study, people already had the hypothesis. Now we had the data to confirm it, was that the UFO contact phenomenon was overwhelmingly a paranormal phenomenon.
Yeah.
People see it, the UFOs, they see the physical beings, but their experiences are much more closely similar to near-death experiences, to out-of-body experiences, et cetera, et cetera. But that was never documented, and so we documented it in our book. And so and also the main reason why we did the UFO research first was because if the most of the members of the free organization, and now this new organization, I'll talk about in a couple of minutes, CCRI, the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, all of us hypothesized that the UFO phenomenon was a consciousness-based phenomenon, that it wasn't like Jacques Vallée says. He doesn't believe that they're ETs from a physical planet, that there's something a little bit more complicated. So that approach totally contradicts the field of materialist ufology, okay? And the reason for that is, and I'll elaborate later on, but I'll start to give an introduction to it, is that the nature of our reality is a consciousness-based reality. It's both physical and psyche. And that's the problem that had confounded J. Allen Hynek, Jacques Vallée, John Keel, we were talking about him before, John Mack, and so many other people, and Edgar Mitchell. But Edgar Mitchell understood that our reality is really more, in modern terms, of virtual reality. He called it a holographic consciousness-based reality. So he was like one step ahead of most of these other people. Why? Because he had started the Institute for Noetic Sciences in Petaluma, California in 1972. So he was interested in studying the academics behind the paranormal since the early 70s. And in 1974, he published a 700-page book titled Psychic Exploration. It's still in print. You can get used copies from Amazon. And in that 700-page book was an edited book, and he explored all of the paranormal except for 2 items. One was near-death experiences, and that was because NDEs was not public at that time. It was a year later that Raymond Moody published Life After Life. And Edgar's book was published in 74. Moody's book was published in 75. And then he also specifically stated in his 1974 book that even though the UFO phenomenon, he perceived it to be a consciousness-based paranormal phenomenon, there was 0 academic research in that field. And so that's why he didn't include it, okay? And so Edgar was like light years ahead of everyone else in putting this whole picture together. So in order to compare, for example, UFOs to near-death experiences, to out-of-body experiences, to ghosts
Mhm.
and spirits, and even hallucinogens have been studied since the 1950s, especially LSD. There were thousands of peer-reviewed publications in the 1950s on LSD until it was disbanded.
Yeah.
And just recently, over the last 10 years, there have been numerous academic institutions that are studying DMT, that are studying LSD, and psilocybin, which is the ingredient in mushrooms. Um, and as a matter of fact, one publication that we have in our book was an article that was published by a tenured professor of psychology at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. His name is Roland Griffiths, and he did a study on DMT, and he compared DMT to the near-death experience. Okay, so he already did his comparative analysis of these two seemingly separate groups, but they're showing that they're basically having very, very similar experiences. And so, and then the topic of near-death experiences, there are literally thousands of peer-reviewed publications on NDEs, and numerous academics and medical doctors have published many academic books on NDEs. And then the topic of ghosts and spirits, that's been studied by academia
Mhm.
since the time of William James, in the
Yeah.
early 1900s and even the late 1800s. So there's tons of research on all of these other arenas of the contact modalities. But for UFOs, specifically UFO contact experiencers, there was nothing. Nothing. There was only a short study that was done by Dr. Kenneth Ring, who's one of the pioneers of NDE researchers. He
Mhm.
published a book in 1992 titled The Omega Project. And this was a statistical work. And what he did is basically he had 85 people that had near death experiences and 85 people that had UFO contact experiences. And he implemented a statistical data collection instrument to both of these groups. And what he found out that both of these groups were having the same exact experience. Okay,
So
um,
it was a comparative study.
a comparative study. And
Okay.
what we did is we borrowed 70 questions from his book that talked about how these people changed over time.
Mhm.
And we had 70 questions. And let me just give you a couple examples. How did they change regarding their views on spirituality, their views of religion, ecological views? Did they become much more loving people, much more caring? Did they fear death? Okay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we asked those 70 questions, and he had the same exact results for both groups, which intuitively, if you would read all the abduction literature that's out there, you would think that these are two totally distinct groups with total different approaches. What he found out was that overwhelmingly both groups, the abductee group and the NDE group, towards the end of many, many years of experiences, they viewed their experiences as overwhelmingly positive and
Well, Ray,
overwhelmingly transformative.
let me ask you this:
Yeah.
some ideas of consciousness is, and I was reading an article recently about this, and even Dr. Bob Davis, who's been on the show, has discussed this, that our sense of being consciously aware, can come from the fact that almost everything that we actually think is actually subconscious. we our awareness is simply our own mind remembering, like, split seconds later, what our subconscious mind is doing. Do you think that that's a viable theory? And if
No,
so, what does that mean for
no,
paranormal memory?
no, 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 no. Um, if you were to thoroughly research the out of body phenomenon,
Hmm.
the astral travel phenomenon, the near death experience phenomenon, okay, you will quickly learn that your brain, okay, is sleeping away in bed or dead on an operating table. Okay, um, and this subconscious aspect of it is not a viable explanation. What most of the academics in our group understand is that we are living inside a virtual reality that's also spiritual.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, the NDE phenomenon, presents thousands of case studies of this being a spiritual phenomenon, not a religious perspective from religion, okay? But there is an a mind of God, a universal consciousness behind all of our phenomena. Because when you are shown a life review, roughly 1 out of every 4 people that has an NDE is shown a life review of their life. You relive your life, okay? The details of it, okay? And so this is not your own individual subconsciousness. No, it's your own individuated unit of consciousness, okay? Once we die, or once we go out of our body, the individuated unit of consciousness leaves our 4D reality, okay? For example, okay, you're having an out-of-body experience, which I define separately from astral travel experiences, okay? I call that realm where the OBE takes place the 5D reality, because you are outside your 4D reality. You're seeing your body underneath you. You go to your daughter's room. You're floating above the ceiling. You're seeing her room. You're going to the neighbors next door. You might go to another city. You might visit Aunt Sally, who lives in where you live now instead of Queens, New York, And so that is a typical out-of-body experience. You're still interacting with your 4D reality. You're still interacting with Earth, the planets, the physical reality that you're interacting with. Now, once you pierce that veil, okay, of that 5D reality, then you're going to these higher astral realms. And these are the people that are having astral travel experiences. And that phenomenon is extremely similar to the near-death experience. Okay,
But-
obviously they're quite
yeah.
different, but similar in the sense that you're dealing with literally an infinite number of realities. Okay, you're dealing with almost an infinite number of higher forms of intelligences that are interacting with you. Okay, you also can manifest things. For example, Preston Dennett, who's written several books about the paranormal and about 20 books on ufology. His major experience is the astral travel experience. When he first began to control that experience, immediately after he popped out and went into these higher dimensions, he immediately screamed out, "Mama, Mama," wanting to see his mother. And guess what was manifested right in front of him? His mother. Okay. That's happened literally hundreds of times. Okay. And when people talk about astral travel experiences, most of these major astral travel experiences talk about manifesting physical events, perceived physical events. With both out-of-body experiences, with astral travel experiences, and near-death experiences, you still retain your senses. You're able to see, you're able to hear, okay? You're many cases you're able to smell, touch. I haven't I don't remember a case of tasting, but many of these perceived physical senses, which are physical senses of a 4D reality, gets carried over. Okay.
Well, I mean, in ufology, the sense of taste is one of the least reported sensations.
Yeah,
it's very rare. Yeah.
Well, what this book is all about, the mind of God. This book is the introduction to our 4-volume book series. Is there any way possible that you can go to our website so I could?
Yeah, absolutely.
How much time do we have, Alan?
We have another 40 minutes.
Okay, all right. So I laid a proper foundation for this. Let me know when we have the website.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Our website, which is still in draft stage, okay, we still haven't opened it up, but you can go there to get a preliminary view. It's titled agreaterreality.com. Okay. And that's the title of our 4-volume book series. If you could scroll down a little bit. We have, start at the very top with Rudy Shields. We have 5 co-editors. That man that you see at the top, Dr. Rudy Shields, he is an emeritus professor of astrophysics at Harvard University. He was at Harvard for 45 years. He's published tons of books contradicting Stephen Hawking, and years later, Hawking admitted that he was incorrect about black holes. That's Dr. Rudy Shields, a genius among geniuses. The next person down the line, Dr. Jeffrey Long, he's one of the primary foundations of near-death experience research. He has been collecting statistical data on NDE experiencers for over 20 years. He has over 13,000 case histories of NDE experiencers, and he has a statistical database which we've been given access to. And he's published 2 major books on near-death experiences. So that's Dr. Jeffrey Long, and he's a medical doctor. He's a cancer specialist. Dr. John Climo, was a professor for over 40 years at several universities, Ph.D. from Brown University, and he's chaired more than 100 dissertations focusing on the paranormal, including consciousness research, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, ufology, etc. And so he's another co-editor, and he's also retired. And then Dr. Michael Grosso was a professor for over 40 years of philosophy. He holds a PhD from Columbia University, and he's also an experiencer. Okay, and he's written primarily on consciousness and the paranormal. He has close to 10 books related to consciousness and the paranormal. And then I'm the last person here, and I went to University of California, Berkeley for a PhD. Went to Cornell for a master's degree, and so I'm primarily a researcher. I was a professor for 6 years before I became an attorney. And then this is a cover picture of our book. It's titled The Greater Reality, and we have 4 volumes. Okay, and as you can see there, the 4 major terms there are NDEs, OBEs, UFOs, and spirits. Those are the 4 major contact modalities. And then there's other smaller contact modalities, and we have it being sucked up into a black hole where space-time gets warped. And the name of the organization is CCRI, Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. And I would like to be able to go over volumes 1 and 2, which are our theoretical volumes. If okay, I don't know what happened there.
Oh, we lost it. Hold on.
Okay, but basically, volumes 2, each volume is 800 pages in length, and both of these volumes were written by these PhD academics and medical doctors, and a few researchers that are not academics, but these are people that are like top in their fields. That have been studying their respective phenomena that they're interested in for more than 40 years. Like, for example, Paul Eno has been studying the phenomenon of ghosts, spirits, poltergeists, and attachments for 50 years. So Paul wrote a chapter on those topics, and a highly educated man, he had spent numerous years. He was almost a priest, like a couple of weeks before he was an ordained priest. So, so that's just an example of a non-academic that wrote a chapter for a book. If you're
I always appreciate people who were close to becoming priests, or were ordained in an order, and then came out, because they do offer a unique perspective on these studies. But I do want to ask, though, and I know we have time to cover so much, but I don't want to just hit point.
Okay, gotcha.
About the features of the book, and because there are plenty of credentialed people, but when the experiencers are having these experiences, because you're kind of proposing this virtual reality, right? So when an experiencer is having something, let's say near-death experience, there's a cause and effect. The cause is near death, and then they have this experience afterwards. It's similar but different. Alien abduction is they were taken from their bed or their sleep. They have an experience, similarities but different. So if there are different, I don't know if it's the right word, Ray, like physical triggers or something that creates the experience, what does that mean? Why aren't they having the same experience? Why is each one different? Why is each an initial physical alteration in their state leading to slightly different paths?
Okay, that was one of the issues I raised in my book. Okay, that is that all of the different contact modalities have commonalities, of the experience. For example, an NDE experience, the first commonality is that your consciousness is out of your body, and you see your body underneath you. Okay, not everybody has that has an
Yeah.
NDE, but that's one of the criteria. Another one is going through this tunnel, your
Mhm.
consciousness going super fast through this perceived tunnel. Some people, it could be a long bridge, other people a different type of a format, but still is this transition.
Mhm.
Going to the light, that's another commonality. Seeing deceased relatives, that's another commonality. Okay, seeing a perceived being that people identify as God, that's another commonality. Given a life review, another commonality. Okay, the overwhelming sense of love multiplied like a billion. Okay, that's another commonality. I could go on and on and on with these
Mhm.
commonalities of the NDEs, but not everyone has everything. Okay, some
Yeah.
people have had most of them or all of them. Okay, but very few. Most people have mixtures. Same thing with the UFO contact phenomenon. But I want to clarify for the audience members.
Mhm.
I Most of what is circulating on the internet about the UFO contact phenomenon is bullshit. Okay, literally BS. Why? Because no one has ever done the study before. Okay, what you had is literally uh, hundreds of books published by individuals.
Mhm.
And then you had these people that have published their books on hypnotic regressions, people like David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, who
Mhm.
viewed every single one of these experiences as negative, okay, traumatic, but yet our findings prove the total opposite, okay? And at most they worked with like 200 people. They had an agenda. They set the whole tone for it, okay? Most of these people are like Whitley Strieber and Kathleen Martin, that in the very beginning they were fearful of the experience, which is obvious. We
Mhm.
found out that initially 37% viewed their experiences as negative. 37%. But towards the very end, only 4% viewed it as negative.
But initially, a lot of people felt it was negative.
Well, all of a sudden, you see this little 3 foot a group of 3 or 4 little 3 foot beings with a
Mhm.
huge head, right on top of your face, visiting you in your bedroom, and
But
and
see
you
that,
can't
but that's the
you can't move. You're fearful. But
yeah,
then
yeah.
most of these people, what we discovered was that 40% of these people had more than 20 experiences. Okay, another 20% had between
Mhm.
10 to 20. So that's 60. What is it? 60% of the people had more than 10 experiences. What we discovered was that the more experiences you had, the more positive was your perception of the experience.
Right, right, and that's the interesting thing here, Ray, that I think a lot of us struggle with is that that's the perception of these individuals when you're doing the statistics, right? But objectively, standing outside of that, looking in, um, I don't accept personally, even though I have some friends that have had very loving experiences like this, right? I don't accept quite yet personally that being taken from your home
Uh,
um,
first
without
of
your
all,
consent is or
Alan,
yeah.
that is a misnomer in ufology.
Well, that's the thing. So
That's
is
a
it is it
misnomer.
all
You,
is it
you
all up
haven't
here?
you haven't read our book. Well, there's several aspects to that. Okay,
Hmm.
several aspects. Let me address each one. Okay, first of all, okay, the abductees. We only discovered that out of the 4,300 people that had seen UFOs
Hmm.
and have contact with a non-human intelligence,
Hmm.
only 1/3 had what is typically called an abduction experience. Okay, out of those people that had an abduction experience, 70% call themselves contactees and not
Right. Yeah.
abductees, because like Whitley Strieber, like Kathleen Martin, they first Kathleen Martin started. She wrote the book Captured about the Benning Barney Hill experience. Now she wrote a book just recently titled From Abduction to Spirituality. Whitley Strieber started writing off communion,
Yeah.
okay, and now he's writing love and light books, where he admits that he prays to these beings, giving them thanks every day for giving him spirituality and allowing him to communicate with his wife. They're two of them are just symbols of this whole transition that's taking place now in terms of the abduction phenomenon. Okay, in the overwhelming majority of these cases, okay, the abductees, a lot of the information comes via hypnotic regressions. Okay, a lot of these people that have been doing this for many years, these are people that have been influenced and trained by Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, to view all these as from a negative perspective.
Mhm.
And if you're going to these UFO conferences for 30 years and you're having David Jacobs and Whitley Strieber and what's his name, the alien hunter, Daryl Sims, lecture you at all these UFO conferences, and then you read many of those books, once you go before a hypnotic regression, you're primed already. You're primed.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a concern. That's like any form of investigation. Like
Yeah,
yeah.
you're primed. And also, there were many videos of David Jacobs' hypnotic regressions, and you could see all the leading questions, like this woman that had reptilian experiences. Right
Mhm.
before he's videotaping someone, he says, "Oh, last week I had someone with a reptilian, experiences, and they were raped, they were violated, whatever. I hope that doesn't happen to you." Blah blah blah. So it's like that's all captured on film. And there was an article that's going to appear in our book by by one of the wives of Bud Hopkins, where she talks about that because she knew Bud Hopkins, she knew David Jacobs. So, and it's titled Co-Conspirators or something along those lines, the alien abduction, creating the alien abduction phenomenon. Okay, and these is for someone that knew these people directly, and she referred to videos that she had taken, others had taken. So the whole abduction phenomenon needs to be revisited.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to
Yeah,
say that in my own documentary Half Light, I mean, that's one of the themes. There is
yeah.
the overall spiritual and positive aspect of it. What I wanted to do was parse out, because I know the statistics. I've read the book. The new book I'm just starting, but the first Beyond UFOs I've read, and
Well, Alan,
but
you'll admit. Let me ask you a question.
it's the perception.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead. No,
have you read anything close to what we did? Has anyone else done
no, and
a
that's the great.
comprehensive academic research study on
Yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah. That's the point. That's what I'm trying to parse out, because to my mind, intuitively, just from listening to stories, it seems that there is something going on here. And I think in chat, Tracing Owl says, she was taken astrally, not physically, and that's another way I think of looking at this. That taken might be the wrong word because it's a charged word, um, but that small percent, report that they were taken, either whether it was in their mind, felt like they were taken somewhere else, or physically, that there is still something a little scary about that. Now,
What,
so if you
what,
break
what,
down
yeah.
that little bit, how do we see that differently now than all those decades, like you said,
Okay.
of
The,
books?
the the vast majority of the people that describe their experiences to
Hmm.
us, okay, once we delve into these experiences of these people, they were taken astrally. Let me give you a couple examples. I mentioned these examples in my books of three friends of ours. These are some of the world's major contact experiencers, but nobody knows about them. Okay. One is a medical doctor, Dr. Melinda Greer. Another one is a retired DEA federal agent who helped to bring down Manuel Noriega and the dictator of Haiti, baby Doc Duvalier. And another individual, uh, she's had some unbelievably profound experiences for close to 50 years. And all of these people were for example, my friend Alberto, the ex-DEA agent, okay? His wife is a PhD psychologist, okay, for over 45 years. She's had her own practice. They're both in their mid 70s. Their daughter's a PhD psychologist, okay? She also has her own practice. And both of them were witnesses to many of Alberto's experiences. So these are joint experiences. Let me give you an example, okay? Which I mentioned from our book. Alberto's on his living room watching TV. Okay,
Hmm.
all of a sudden this being appears that he identifies as Archangel Michael. I said, "What do you think it's Michael?" Well, he was like 7 feet tall. He was muscular. He had a long robe, you know, and and he says, "Alberto, you've been thinking about death lately. I want to inform you, you shouldn't fear death," and gave him a life review, brought him to the to the higher astral planes where
Hmm.
people have NDEs, showed him the whole process, explained it to him in details, and after he finished, boom, brought him back. Okay, same thing. He's had tons of these experiences. Okay, tons of these experiences, all with human looking beings, very different. Okay, some had African features. One was this Asian man in a monk's robe, okay? A brown monk's robe. Another guy had a long beard. He said, Zeus came and visited me last night, while I was watching TV. The same thing was on his TV. Another time was this Indian warlord, not Indian, Chinese warlord, dressed in, ancient garb. And he says, Alberto, my name is blah, 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 blah. You were my adopted son. This is your name, blah, blah, blah. And you were my adopted son in a past life. Okay. And showed him all these things. And he says, write down my name and your name. And he quickly got a pen and he wrote it down. This is a physical being that was in his living room. And then he wrote it all down. And he says, if you don't believe me, go to the library, to research it, a very good library. And then he says, he just let it go. And like a couple of days later, this sword appeared to him, had 21 notches. And this being told him he had 21 kills in his past life. Okay. And so all of a sudden he was like freaking out. It's like, holy shit, this is real, So he went to the University of Miami, their Asian section. He had a librarian to look up old books about whatever that year was, 640 BC or 80. I forgot what it was. And boom, there was this warlord's name and there was Alberto's name. Okay. So what that was a lesson about reincarnation. Okay. The other lesson was a lesson about that we are souls, eternal spiritual beings. When we die, we go up to this other realm. Okay. And so Alberto was giving these types of lessons all the time with these physical beings that would take him astrally to other dimensions. And in our research study, we found out 50% of the people, half of the people, okay, were brought to other astral realms by these higher forms of intelligence. Same thing happened to me. Okay. Same thing. Except I was driving my car in the middle of a traffic jam. Okay. That's probably the most important experience that I had, because that's where I was shown the relationship between consciousness and all of the contact modalities. So what I'm telling you is not anything new, okay? But ufology doesn't talk about this, okay? They don't talk about anything that's paranormal related, anything that's consciousness related.
Well, we do on this program. We mix it all up.
You're an exception there, Alan.
Yeah, but I am curious because that perception is important, but it has to be grounded in some kind of science, right? So
the science was our data.
No. I mean, so these experiences, what's the science say about the nature of reality itself?
Okay.
What have you come to find? Yeah.
All right. First of all, let me backtrack. I talk about this in my book. Okay. I talk about many of the pioneers of quantum physics, Nobel Prize winners. They all stated the same thing that the members of our organization hypothesize. Number one is that consciousness is primary. Consciousness is fundamental. Okay, we're talking about Erwin Schrödinger. We're talking about Max Planck, Niels Bohr, and several others. And some of them, they didn't win the Nobel Prize, but they were like Sir James Jeans. They had all these fancy titles and awards that they won. They just never won the Nobel Prize. It was like about 5 or 6 of them. And same thing with neuroscientists. Okay, people that studied the brain. Okay. 3 of them were Nobel Prize winners in physiology. They all said the same thing, that consciousness is primary and not our physical 4D reality. Okay, so this is an ancient tradition that was discussed since the Upanishads from ancient India, the Buddhist tradition, the Egyptian tradition, the Greek and Roman tradition, et cetera, et cetera. They all understood this, except they described it in these mystical discussions from their ancient texts. Okay, now, what does the literature of the contact modalities, and for your readers, that's a term that I coined in 2013 after I had that out-of-body experience where I was shown all these things, and that was edited by Edgar Mitchell. Okay, and the contact modalities are all the different ways that human beings are piercing the veil of our 4D reality and having contact with perceived higher forms of intelligence. And the contact modalities are, as I showed in the picture of my book, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, UFO contact, ghosts and spirits, okay, remote viewing, hallucinogenic journeys, et cetera, et cetera. And now the problem that has riddled a lot of research of the contact modalities are as follows. First of all, our organization views all of the contact modalities as one consciousness-based phenomenon. Okay, right now they're being studied separately. Okay, you go to a UFO conference and you talk to these so-called experts in ufology. Okay, they will say, "What the hell does paranormal have to do with this? What the hell does consciousness have to do with this?" Okay, there's a physical flying saucer. Okay, and what we study are videos, photos, and UFO crashes. Okay, you go to an NDE conference, they'll say, "What the hell does UFOs have to do with this? What the hell does OBEs have to do with this?" Even though the OBE is a component of an NDE, and et cetera, with all of these different fields. There are a few exceptions out there, like that research study that was done by that professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, where he compared DMT to the near-death experience. Okay, and like Kenneth Ring. Kenneth Ring was one of the pioneers of NDE research, but he compared the UFO abduction phenomenon with the near-death experience. So, and then most of the members of our organization, and hopefully before we finish, you can show up that website so people can take a look at it. And I can show people.
Everyone listening, it's a greaterreality.com.
Yeah, greaterreality.com. And there you will see a whole list of these academics and medical doctors that have written papers for volumes 1 and volume 2. Now, each of them is addressing a specific aspect of the phenomenon. We start off with the discussion of, like, what is consciousness? Okay. And one of the articles is written by a physicist, Dr. He's not he's an ABD, all but dissertation, Tom Campbell. And he was the guinea pig for Robert Monroe doing out-of-body experiences and astral travel experiences. But because he was getting his Ph.D. in physics, he began to do physics experiments outside of his body. And he's been doing that for 40 years. So he wound up publishing a book, I don't know if you've heard it, titled My Big Toe. My Big Theory of Everything. Okay, it's a very thick book. It's 700 pages, but it explains in very detailed step-by-step analysis his thesis that we are living inside a virtual reality, which is also spiritual, because out of his body he's encountered this being that he identifies as God. Okay, the universal mind. Okay, and so this man, I mean, he's a brilliant, genius. You just listen to him. Almost had a PhD. He worked in the physics field for over 45 years. We have articles by Dr. Edgar Mitchell. We had the magnum opus that he wrote. It was only published in the Journal of Cosmology, an astrophysics journal. It's an explanation which uses physics jargon, which is not an easy read, but anyone can attempt to read that, explaining the nature of consciousness and what is called non-local consciousness, how human beings are tapping the information fields, like the zeros and ones that we have in our background, commonly called the Akashic records, okay? And they're able to download information from the non-local energy fields. And that's how a consciousness operates within a holographic reality. Now, the term holographic reality and a virtual reality are sort of synonymous. A lot of scholars in our group use different terminology to describe the same thing. Okay, and then what this book is, The Mind of God, which I have here in front of you, and I sent a copy to you. It doesn't show up in the screen here, but yeah, there it is. That book is actually the introduction article to the 4 volumes of A Greater Reality. And there in that book, I at least for this purposes of this conversation, is I go over 11 commonalities of the contact modalities, okay, of what all the paranormal has in common. And I could go over just a few of them just to get an understand. First of all of the contact modalities involves a manipulation of space-time. Okay, in terms of the field of ufology, Jacques Vallée, since the late 60s, when he's published his books Dimensions and Revelations, et cetera, those books, he talked about steadily about that the UFO phenomenon involves a manipulation of space-time. And that's why he argued that this phenomenon are not ETs coming from a physical planet. There's something much more complex, that they might be interdimensional in nature. So that's the first commonality. Like when you see your Aunt Jane, you buried her 2 days ago, and she appears very physical right in front of you. Okay. You ask the question, is Aunt Jane real or is she not real?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is she physical or is she not physical? Well, you buried your Aunt Jane 2 days ago, but now she's in front of you in a physical form 2 days later in her favorite Sunday dress. Okay. That's what happened to what's his name? Preston Dennett. That was his first paranormal experience, seeing his dead mother right in front of him. Okay. And so that was the first commonality, the manipulation of space-time. The other commonality is that if there is contact with, all of them involve contact with a perceived higher form of intelligence. You could call it non-human intelligence, whatever you want, but all of them involve contact with non-human intelligence. Okay. Another commonality is that all contact involves telepathic communications, and that telepathic communications is in your native language. If you've had UFO contact, it's telepathic. And if you're French, you live in France, it's in French. If you live in Argentina, it's going to be in Spanish. Okay, telepathic. Same thing with a near-death experience. You die, you have a near-death experience in Spain, that experience is going to be in your native language, at least what you perceive it to be in your native language.
Yeah, or just sensations, feelings, not necessarily language all the time.
Well, it's not really a language. It's more
impressions,
it's more complicated than that. But at least your consciousness perceives it in your native language.
Exactly.
The other thing is that my book talks about how human consciousness is able to travel up the various astral realms. I already alluded to it earlier. When you have an out-of-body experience, you're 5D. When you're having astral travel experience, it's now higher astral realms. When you have an NDE, it's within the mind of God where that takes place, the highest of the astral realms. And then also from the non-human intelligence, they could also travel up and down as well. Okay, seeing your Aunt Sally. Okay, she did not originate. Okay, in our earthly plane. Okay, same thing with seeing these beings, these UFO related beings. First of all, most of these experiences are, for example, the UFO phenomenon. You never get an experience that lasts, 15 minutes, half an hour, where you're interacting with a being. Most of these experiences are very quick, less than a minute. Okay, most of them less than 30 seconds, and then after that experience, okay. That's it. Now, all of these experiences that we get earlier, another issue is that these experiences are all individuated experiences to the individual. Okay? There's not two NDE experiences that are the same. They're all completely different. UFO contact experiences. You never get a UFO contact experiences that's exactly the same as someone else. They're all unique to the person. And we're not talking about seeing a UFO or just a little gray popping in front of you. We're talking about these higher level types of contact experiences that are discussed by major contact experiences. So while they all have the parameters of the genre, they're all uniquely tailored to you.
I do want to get a question in here, Ray, from chat. Tracing Owls asks, what do you think of Raymond Fowler's work?
Well, we have a chapter by Raymond Fowler. That's going to be in volume 3 of our book. And I also wrote the prelude to his latest book. It was a book that's basically chronologizes his whole history of research. Okay. Now, Raymond Fowler started off as a traditional materialist ufologist. Okay. Then over many, many years working with these people, he also did hypnotic regressions. He found out that they didn't follow the abduction mode of Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs. It was a totally different phenomenon, just like Dr. John Mack. Dr. John Mack, once he published his initial book on abductions, which were based solely on individuals that Bud Hopkins referred to him. Later on, after he published that book, he then had hundreds of people coming to him with their experiences. And he wound up interviewing these people, and wrote a book, A Passport to the Cosmos, which is the total antithesis to Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs' perspective. So Raymond Fowler went through that same transitions, and then towards the very end, he was focusing primarily on the topic of consciousness.
Wait, was there anything in his work? Was there anything in his work that was indicative of a virtual reality or any sort of construct like what you're
It
talking
was,
about tonight?
yes, his last two books talk about that. Yeah,
Okay.
his last two books. But again, this is a man that started off from a totally different perspective, and
Mhm.
his transition has been a slow transition. Okay,
Yeah. Because
just
well,
like
because
Brad Steiger, the same thing. He
yeah.
wrote the conclusion to our book, Beyond UFOs. He started off as a straight paranormal researcher. At the end, he fully understood that these were all consciousness-based phenomena.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're familiar with I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Jacques Vallée, right?
Oh yeah. We
Yeah.
quoted him extensively.
Yeah.
In,
So
in the Mind of God, he's quoted extensively. And one concept to introduce to you is that he's hypothesized that the UFO phenomenon were holographic projections. Okay,
right. So
correct. And that's what I wrote about. Of
and that's what's in. Yeah. Sorry, Ray. That's what's interesting is because recently he and Paola Harris have been talking about this Trinity 1945 UFO alleged crash landing. And the takeaway, it seems from Jacques' perspective, is that because we all ask, how can a UFO crash 3 times within 2.5 years in New Mexico, right? And this all was stimulated after the first atomic bomb was exploded in New Mexico. And his idea is that, or his what he speculates is that these are responses from beings, uh, and they're purposely crashing, purposely landing to trigger a psychological effect in our collective consciousness. Now, when I hear something like that, that makes me think a little bit about a quantum reality, almost like a video game where there are these challenges that kind of pop up or intercede, and you have to go on this new path. What's your take on
Okay.
that?
First of all, before I get dropped here, I want to tell everyone I can give away free chapters from our book series and the old book Beyond UFOs for
Mhm.
free. Just send me an email to info at agreaterreality.com. That's info at agreaterreality.com. Okay. In terms of that topic, okay, there's not one shred of evidence that a UFO has crashed. Okay, not one shred of evidence. Okay, but there are thousands of testimony of individuals that can describe these experiences as holographic projections. May I give you just two very, very quick experiences?
Sure, good.
Okay, one is Dr. Joseph Burks, and you need to interview him because he's a major.
Oh, Joseph's been on the show several times. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. He
yeah.
he described to me, which I wrote about in the book here, at the very beginning when he was doing the initial CE5 in
Hmm.
the early 1990s. I guess this was 1992 when he first started. One of the very first projections that he saw was of an old wooden plane painted bright red. Okay, it didn't have any propellers in it. It had little tiny wings. Okay, and looked like a World War I, plane,
Hmm.
and it was like hovering like a helicopter, very on top of him and some other people. So immediately he knew this was not a real plane, that this thing could not fly. And he later on, upon analysis, he realized that these were holographic projections. And he wrote a chapter in our book, which is appearing in volume 2, which we have 11 articles on the UFO phenomenon. Okay,
Hmm.
11 articles. These are all consciousness-based perspectives of the phenomenon. And Joseph Burks argues, based upon all the UFO literature, that we are living inside a virtual reality and that these experiences are holographic projections. I also had an experience as well. We don't have enough time to go into all the details, but if you were to listen, and later on, the details of that experience. For example, I was seeing something, okay, and in
Mhm.
my head, my friends that were next to me were questioning. They still didn't believe it was a UFO. So in my mind, I
Mhm.
said, "You better come up with some better bullshit than this because my friends don't believe you." Okay, instantaneously, what we were watching totally disappeared, replaced by something totally different.
Wait, was
Okay.
that big star scene?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Initially, it was hundreds of oblong streaks of light and
Yeah.
this white energy in the middle of it. Okay. My
Mhm.
friends were trying to explain it away. And then I said, "Look, you better come up with some better BS than this because they don't believe you." And boom, that was deleted and instantaneously replaced by like 100 huge orbs the size of Volkswagens.
Yeah.
And
Did you only share that in the Mind of God? Was that the
yes,
first
yes,
first time you shared that? Okay.
correct, correct. That's the first time I shared that. And
Um,
and so
so let me ask
yeah.
you that because we are out of time. So I mean, I have to ask this question because you just said it that you don't believe that UFOs actually crashed. I would disagree based on
Well,
documentation.
show me the evidence. Okay,
Well,
show
no,
me
no,
the evidence. What you
it's
have
certainly
is,
circumstantial. Yeah, yeah. But my
yeah,
what I that's less important than that is
yeah.
more related to your research. Is it possible that because we're in this kind of quantum matrix reality, right? That could these things not manifest physically, or at least appear to be physical?
Of course, and that's been the dilemma in ufology all these years.
But
Just like,
okay, but like in Star Trek, they go into
yeah,
the hologram. It feels
yeah.
real. You touch it.
Yes,
Is that
yes,
possible?
yes, of course. That's why I argue in my book. I hope you get a chance to actually read it because I argue in that book, just like seeing your deceased aunt 2 days after she's buried. She's physically right in front of you. You could touch her if you want to. She's in her favorite Sunday dress. Is she real or is she not? Okay. So this is a manifestation from the virtual reality, from the mind of God, of a very real experience. And the philosophers, Jeffrey Kripal wrote the introduction, the prelude to our 4-volume book series. He's a dean at Rice University
Mhm.
of philosophy and humanities, and the way he describes it, coins this phenomenon is a dual. He calls it dual aspect monism. Very briefly, when our consciousness comes down into this 4D reality, we
Mhm.
now have to do with physical space and time. Okay, so then our consciousness breaks off into two components. One is the consciousness based aspect of it, and
Mhm.
then the other one is to deal with the physicality. So while we're in this reality here, we have like dual consciousness, one to deal with the physicality, the other one, which is who we really are, an eternal spiritual being. But when we die, boom, the closing, the sheet skin comes off, okay, and we're just a pure consciousness being. So I described it in my book. It's much more elaborate than what I just said, but that's just for the audience members to understand a philosophical explanation, which has a long history of
Mhm.
explaining our perception of what is real and what is not real.
All
And
right.
so
Okay. So
once again, info@agreaterreality.com. Send me an email and I'll send you a whole bunch of documents associated to this research.
all right, right. And I will finish your book. Don't you worry. I love your work. I appreciate your tenacity. And if we don't keep kind of poking the bear, if we don't keep pushing the box, and pushing the envelope, then the conversations do get stale, and we'll end up kind of chasing our own tails. So I
Well,
appreciate
I
your work.
reckon everyone to take a look at our website. You'll see there's over 25 PhD academics and medical doctors. Two of them are physicists. Okay. Two of them, as a matter of fact, are astrophysicists. We have PhD in biochemistry, PhD in neuroscience, you name it, we've got it. So this is legitimate academic research. They all think the same way as I do. So
Yeah.
don't think I'm a crazy madman. You literally have thousands of academics all over the world that view reality the same way.
Nope.
And they are explaining what is consciousness and what is the paranormal. But the fields of ufology, in your case, that you focus a lot on UFOs, is totally clueless about this.
All right, Ray. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Everyone, please go check out Ray's website, agreaterreality.com. His books are packed full of information. The Mind of God, which I did start to read here, and I will continue to read
Please,
because
please,
he's got
please do.
you have 4 more books coming out, so I'm gonna have to catch up.
This
Yeah,
is the introduction to the 4 books. So if you
yeah.
can make me a promise, at least that you'll finish this book, and it's quite radical. It's a totally different paradigm of viewing our reality. So a lot of people are not going to understand it, but at least I hope that you're at least accepting of the concepts that I'm presenting. Not that you're going to be accepting them. I'm sorry, but at least you'll make an effort to try to read it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It will be read, and I'm totally open to all of these ideas. Even if I don't initially agree or don't agree over time, I will still continue to listen because sometimes we get caught in our own echo chamber, and I just want to be you know diligent with my own means of thinking and approaches towards these subjects by challenging myself and hopefully challenging the listeners too. So thank you so much, Ray, and thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate it. If you like Paranormal Now and Coffee and UFOs, please go to the Mystic Lounge channel. That's youtube.com/Mystic Lounge. Please comment, and please subscribe. And of course, if you share, organic shares really do help the channel grow. And as always, until next time, everyone, peace and love, and live in the mystery.